Hey,
Hey,
once again,
second attempt here.
second attempt. We at least in Finland we say third time is the charm. I don't know if that's is that a universal thing?
I think that's universal. Yep.
Okay, good. Well, then you learned nothing about Finland. Nothing new. How are you doing?
Doing good. Doing good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Last time we tried to make this happen, you had a snowstorm going. How is the weather this time around?
Little dreary out today, so kind of we just had rain last night, but I think it's clearing up today. So we're just entering. No snow yet this season, so that must have been.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that was? Was that February or something?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that. I think it must have been winter time, obviously. So yeah, not sure.
Okay.
I could have checked it from the email, but something like that. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I mean, first of all, thanks again for taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy person, as people tend to be these days, I guess. But yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on this.
My pleasure. So you're based in Maryland now? Is that
That's correct. Yeah, just a little bit north of Baltimore.
right? And is that where you were born, or what's your background?
No. So I was born in Framingham, Massachusetts. Only spent first year of my life there. Then family moved down to Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. That's where I grew up. And then came to college here in Maryland at the Peabody Institute. And have just stuck around since then, basically. So,
What's
yeah.
the best part of where you live now? If you're talking with somebody like you are, who knows absolutely nothing or very little about that, what is how are you going to sell the place to me?
Maryland?
Yeah.
Well, Maryland kind of has a little bit of it all. You're close to the shore. So, a quick drive. Well, you've got the eastern shore, so you can get to a beach pretty quickly, get to the ocean in maybe 2 hours. But we do have the bay, which is closer. So if you like being on a boat or something like that, that's close by. But we also have kind of mountains to the west. But we're also close to DC, which has a bunch of free museums. Plus, we have our own cool things to see here in Baltimore. We have
Like
a national aquarium, and actually, Baltimore has a very rich history. For instance, it's the birth of American railroading. So we have a really cool railroad museum. A lot of rich history is in the city. A lot of people don't realize that because it kind of saw some decline in the last 50 years or something, where it was a main port of the United States for 150 years. And then it kind of moved to Philadelphia. Still a major port, but it was even more so. So there's a lot of history. Just a lot of famous American leaders basically lived in Baltimore. So there's all sorts of stuff around.
Yeah.
Museums, But Maryland in general is in terms of cuisine is the land of crabs. So blue crabs in particular. So if you ever come to Maryland, you have to have a crab feast and a crab cake. So crab feast, I don't know if you're familiar. They steam the crabs and season them in like this. It's a special seasoning. And then the table's covered with this really thick paper, and you just dump a whole bunch of hot steamed crabs on the table, and you just start picking at them and eating them. It's really quite an experience that's very unique to Maryland. I've never experienced that in any other state but here. So
Yeah, that does
cool.
sound pretty weird, especially the paper part.
Yeah, because it's just like that's the way of protecting the table, I guess. So
yeah,
because it's very messy. So
yeah, we do have this thing here called rapujuhlat, which is basically like crab party.
Okay.
That sounds weird when you say it like that, but basically, I think it's like a certain time of the year. I don't know what is crab season. Is it like spring or summer? Maybe summertime?
For us, we always say it's any month that ends in ER. So like it really, like we can get crab in August, but like starting in September, October, November, like that's really, actually right now is kind of at the ending of peak crab season. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Good. Hopefully the parties don't end at the ER as well, but I guess you never know.
No. Yeah.
Right. So, if we go back to your sort of like your origin story, I guess, because I mean, this is some information that I couldn't find about you, and I thought maybe it's interesting to let people know how you sort of ended up where you are today. But what did your parents do for a living?
So my dad, he was trying to remember exactly what his engineering title was. He worked for Hewlett Packard for his entire career, which is kind of unique. I mean, goodness, it was probably 40 years that he worked for them. I think he was technically a systems engineer. Started out with doing field repairs, I think, in the like early 80s. So we're talking like very early computer systems. And then eventually ended up working on an office for many years. And when his final job role in that company, it did change. I don't remember what the title was, but he did move to some other field, but it was always with Hewlett Packard. My mom was actually a tennis teacher for many years. So
Nice.
very, very athletic woman, very, can be very, loud and encouraging kind of personality sometimes.
Like the best soccer mom in the world.
Yes. Which as a kid growing up I'd sometimes be embarrassed of that, to be honest. But
Sure.
I've always felt so much support from her and have really appreciated that energy and enthusiasm. But that's what she was. She was kind of a tennis teacher and was helping to raise me and my two sisters. So, yeah.
You gotta. There's always a good side and a bad side to every attribute in a person. Like you had to be maybe a bit embarrassed at some times, but at least you got a lot of support. So,
yeah. It's just one of those things where I remember, I played baseball and stuff. So she'd be the one, the loud one, like cheering me on, like, yeah. Like, okay, Mom, that's a little bit much.
and are you athletic yourself? How did that sort of influence your relationship with athletics? Obviously, now you're doing a very different sort of a profession, but
yes, I mean, absolutely. We growing up, we were always hiking. I played baseball. I tried some other sports, but baseball was really what I ended up doing. I even played that through high school. So, and I've carried that on to now. Like I try to stay active. It's kind of an important part of my life, is just trying to, especially when you're doing this kind of work where you're sitting at a desk all day, like trying to balance that with just staying active with what my own kids are doing and their sports. And I do quite a bit of running. I love to go hiking, backpacking when I can fit it in. That's still very much a part of my life. And I think that's it carries over probably from those childhood experiences. So, yeah.
Did you keep it going from like early years, or did you sort of get into music and then you realized my lower back is destroyed, my neck is messed up? Like, so did you have to integrate it back in, or were you always sort of on top of the ball, so to speak?
Definitely not always on top of the ball. but I've gotten more regular with, like, more regular and intentional with trying to stay active. There were probably a period of 10 years, especially with young kids, where life is just very crazy. You're taking care of the kids, and especially young kids are just very time intensive, and then working at the same time. But I would try to like go hiking or do other things, but it was very not regular, I guess, not intentional. And then I think there's probably this common story where people around my age haven't been to a doctor in 10, 15 years. And then you go to one and they run some blood work and stuff. And you're like, oh, okay. Things aren't completely, things aren't ideal. Like maybe you should be taking care of yourself better. And that basically happened. Nothing alarming, nothing crazy, but it was just like, okay, I see a trajectory here where if I don't make this an intentional part of my life, then I'm not going to be able to do the things that I want to do 20, 30 years from now. And so, it was just that pivot of, okay, I just need to make some intentional life decisions to make being active and doing physical activity, which I enjoy, a priority alongside, music and sitting at a desk. Because really, sitting down all day it's really, really not good for us as humans. Like we're not supposed to do that. So balancing it out, it just became a more intentional thing. Probably about 3 years ago, I think. Yeah.
Talking about chairs, are you rocking an Aero? What is it? What is it called?
No, it looks like that, but it's some just chair that it does allow for airflow. It's like a mesh here that I just got at a local office store. I tried it out and I liked it. So
yeah,
it was quite a bit cheaper than those. I know the ones you're talking about.
Is it a Herman Miller?
The Aero? Herman Millers, yeah. It's not one of those, but it's a similar style to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a standing desk. I mean, I can also sit like I'm sitting now, but I can adjust it. But most of the time I work standing. But I do every once in a while. I do sit sometimes, like it's like on this podcast. But I'm actually, this is like an old wooden. It's actually an old, like a principal's office chair from a school from here. But I think about investing in that sometimes, but I use it so little that it's really not worth it. Talking about sports, is there something that you learned from sports that you sort of carried into music? Like, is there some kind of a lesson or perspective or mindset that you learned in that and that you took into creative work?
Definitely. It's hard work. It's hard work. It's learning how to persevere through setbacks. All of those things carried into being a musician and a professional musician. So, I remember playing baseball growing up. I would practice a lot. And baseball is one of those sports where failure is just something you have to get used to. The best batters that have ever been still got out 6 out of 10 times. So, failure is just something you have to get used to dealing with, and learning how to persevere through that and go back to the next at bat and still give it your best. And then also just the hard work aspect. I remember just practicing my swing a ton, I was a catcher. So I would practice just all the mechanics of being a catcher, blocking bad pitches that were in the dirt and, all the nuances of that. It was a lot of hard work that I put in those years. And, that carries over to music for sure. whether you're writing a piece and it doesn't work out the right way, and being able to revisit it and try to figure out how can I fix this to make it work well, or even writing parts for a certain instrument. That's a whole learning process as well, where sometimes you don't really know what you're writing for until you've worked with the musician, you've worked with the instrument, and just being able to revisit a part and being okay to let go of something that maybe didn't work well, to revise it, and just persevering through that. There's a lot of hard work involved, and I think that carries through.
Yeah. I think sports is pretty interesting because in some ways you're obviously personally playing and personally invested. And if you mess up, you mess up, and you know, you have to own that, and your team, if you have a team, is going to probably let you know as well. But in some ways it feels like a better medium for learning these sort of lessons. If we think about like, I wasn't unfortunately very physically active when I was younger. I did like it, but I just didn't have the initiative to get into anything or to sort of, you know, push myself into it. But whenever I did do sports, I've always enjoyed it as long as the sport was interesting. But I was in a band, and you know, we started getting into music, and obviously there are some, you know, failure experiences there as well. But the problem is, I mean, you know, if you messed up a part or you missed a note. I was a singer and a drummer, but you kind of, you know, you messed up, but the experiences aren't so, there's a subjective degree to it, or you can at least argue in your mind that there's a subjective, you know, degree to it. So I'm sort of a bit afraid that musicians maybe kind of don't have to face the black and white reality of, you know, did you catch the ball or did you not? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you find is there anything valid to that, or what sort of thoughts do you have around that process?
Just about the subjective nature of music, I guess, and that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
because when it comes to sports, there is kind of a very clear, like in baseball, like you got a strikeout or not, you got a base hit or not, you caught something or not. So it's very clear. Whereas with music, there are certainly a lot of there's just a very subjective nature of, like, I mean, I see it on my soundtracks all the time, where I'll have a certain musical tradition that we're writing an arrangement for, and some people will love it, and some people will really hate it because it's not something they're used to hearing. And they are different in that sense, for sure.
Yeah, I think with like, let's say you go and perform on a stage, and you know, some people, again, the results are not going to be black and white. Either you got the point or catched the ball in the sport, or you didn't. But with a stage, like performing, some people are going to like it, some people are going to hate it. You can get a feel from the audience for sure, but even that doesn't always tell everything. And I'm kind of like thinking, does that make musicians less familiar with the process of, you know, having to face failure? Because you can always sort of say, oh, they didn't get it, or oh, that wasn't my audience, or you don't have to, like, you know, face the music, so to speak. No pun intended. But you don't have to, like, face a black and white reality at the end of it. And I'm wondering whether that makes creative people or musicians, in this case that I'm thinking, does it make them less, what's the word that I'm looking for, capable of handling failure? Because I think about that a lot, because a lot of the stuff we talk about on this podcast, some of it, like, I try and give sort of not tough love, but like a good welcoming version of tough love, because there are a lot of realities that you have to face about your creative work, and I just think, like, how can we assist creative people in, you know, confronting their lacking qualities and saying, yeah, that's not good, that sucks, I did that wrong. And I'm afraid that the creative process can be sort of, there are too many outs. You know, you can not look that way, and you can do this, and you can shift gears. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Definitely. So I think a big part of that is being able to look at your work in an honest kind of way, and also just in perspective of all of the other work that's been done before you and that's going on now. You know, as a composer, you don't have to go very far to find amazing composers in history and even now. And that alone is extremely humbling. And you just realize, you know, however good you think you are, there are other composers who, you know, are probably more talented, could probably write something in a way that would be more effective, or, you know, something like that. Or you listen to Bach's counterpoint and you think, my goodness gracious, that is just incredible craftsmanship and musicianship. You know, it's just things like that. And you realize that it's okay to be this critical of your own voice in that perspective of, when you see the great work that's out there, I think. And, you know, I'll look at some pieces I've written in the past and certainly not hesitant to be critical of some of them. And some of them I really like a lot. So I think at least keeping that perspective of that you're not in a bubble, basically, of your own creativity, that there are other amazing musicians out there that are contributing really meaningful things and have contributed meaningful, amazing art. And keeping that perspective certainly is helpful. And basically, I guess not being afraid to criticize your own art and your own creation, because, you know, sometimes we just. I remember there was one of my composition lessons in college. I was working on this violin concerto for string orchestra and solo violin. And I brought it into a lesson, and I had kind of written quite a bit, and we were looking at it, and there was a certain part in the piece where it kind of went off from the main idea a little bit, where I was kind of exploring other themes and stuff. And my teacher encouraged me to consider just getting rid of a pretty large section of that I had just written in the last week, and said, you know, maybe you should try focusing on this thematic material and developing it, focusing it on this. But that required me to let go of a lot of music that I had just written. That, I mean, I wrote it, so I must have thought that it was good at the time, at least. But being able to let go of that, to realize that wasn't the right decision. And I did end up taking his suggestion and trying it, and the piece ended up way better because of that. It was just a much more interesting piece developmentally. It was more focused, and it was absolutely the right call to be able to let go of material for a greater good for the piece. And I think when it comes to like just being able to take criticism or being critical of yourself, that's an important part of growth as a musician, as a composer, is to realize that some of the things that we've done in the past, in our past work, or even if something we're working on right now, that we might need to let go of that. Maybe it wasn't the best way of doing something. Maybe it wasn't the best way of writing a certain piece, or in terms of orchestration, maybe there's some kind of orchestration things that didn't work well during a recording session. And now, to the next one, like, I'm not going to try that again because it didn't speak well in the orchestral recording. And just being able to learn from those things, to stay humble, and to realize that music is just a lifelong learning process for all of us. We never will have arrived in that sense. It's always growing, always learning, always trying new things, and some of them will work and some of them won't. I think that's just a part of being a musician.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's very difficult because when we're writing music, not only are we writing the music, but we're developing a story about what that music is. And then you begin to find yourself trapped in, oh, this verse does this and this chord. If we're talking about like a verse, chorus, bridge type of a thing, whatever you want to call them, but different sections of the song, they basically mean different things to you, and you sort of attribute certain meanings to those parts. And when somebody comes to you and says, that doesn't quite do maybe what you think it's doing, then you're like, oh, you got to let go of that story and break it down and let it go. Is that something, because you're teaching now, right?
Not anymore, actually.
Oh,
I
okay.
was teaching a game audio class at Peabody for many years, and just didn't have time for it anymore. So that I haven't been teaching it for a few years now. I taught it for many, many years. I think it was almost 12 years or something like that. So
yeah. During that time, or other observations you've made, is this like one of the biggest issues you saw composers having, or would that title go to something else? Talking about having the ability to see your music as, from a different perspective.
We didn't do too much rewriting in that class, just because it was such a mixture of things that we were kind of in one thing and then to another thing. Like, we would do a little bit of sound design, a little bit of mock-ups for cinematics and in-game music. Then we would do implementation work with audio middleware. So it was such a varied kind of in and out of a topic kind of class that we didn't do too much rewriting. But from what I think the thing that I remember is just, I think one of the hardest things in that class that I saw students struggling with was I would have them try to do an orchestral mock-up of just a short little orchestral excerpt. And most of the students at that point had never done any kind of work with MIDI sampled instruments. And so they weren't familiar with all of the parameters that they could adjust. They basically weren't familiar with how to play or to work with a sampled instrument as if it was a real instrument. They didn't realize all the velocity crossfading that they could do to get the full dynamics of the instrument. They didn't realize switching between different playing techniques. And so I would give them feedback about this. I mean, we would cover it in a whole class, but then they would put together their mock-ups, and
it's all sustains.
It's all sustain. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all sustains, and it's just not speaking in a realistic way. And some of them would take that feedback and they would go and revise it for a project that they would do later. And then some of them wouldn't. Some of them were just okay being very mediocre. And that was surprising to me. That was surprising that, we would look at these tools, have access to some really amazing sampled instruments. And, some of them really would dive into that and take that criticism and grow from it. And others would not. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously you and I can see what the better path is, that if you want to become better at something, you've got to be challenged. You've got to accept some level of criticism, and then you'll see some improvement. But, not everyone's willing to put in either the time or the energy to make growth in certain areas of musicianship. So, I mean, maybe those students thought, I'm never going to use this again, so I don't need to worry about it. But we never know what the future will bring.
Were those composition students?
Some were composition students, some were recording engineers. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's a mixed bag. I can imagine that a lot of composers would sort of see that as like a worse pit stop kind of a thing. It's like, oh no, I want actual players and not this computer stuff, and I just want to skip to that proper thing. But is when you think about yourself today, how hard do you find it these days is it very easy for you to deploy that sort of more objective perspective? Do you find that you have this sort of faster ability to detach from your music and look at it from a third perspective?
Maybe. I think time always helps. So when you're in the middle of working on something, I think that's probably the hardest time, where it is to detach from it, I guess, because you're pouring your mind and your heart into something. But sometimes you have to do that. You have to realize that whatever you're doing is not working well, and you need to kind of change directions on it. Having other musicians give feedback is another really helpful. Actually, not even musicians. It can be anyone on your team giving feedback can be another really helpful just element to this. It's of course very common in media situations, whether you're doing a film score or a game score. Depending on your team, they very likely want to hear what you're doing and have some opinions opinions on it and direction on that. And I think our tendency as composers would be to be a little bit resistant to that feedback sometimes. And sometimes that's definitely warranted, depending on what the feedback is. But a lot of times there's value to feedback we receive too. And if we can just kind of pick up a little bit of something to take away and come at it with a fresh perspective, that can make things even better than they already are. One piece that comes to mind for me was the opening cinematic to Beyond Earth, where I had brought in a mock-up to the team, and we were going through it, and there was one spot, I had to make a number of revisions to the music for that cue, but there was one spot in particular where I really miscalculated what they had in mind. It's after
techno
a rock
rave,
almost. It was so. I mean, what it was there's a launch, and it's basically this daughter had just said goodbye to her father, because she's been chosen to go colonize a new Earth-like planet.
As you
And
do.
so there's yeah,
As all fathers do at some time. Yeah.
So this daughter, she's blasting off. We see her on the spaceship, and for me, that was an emotional kind of. When I first watched it, that was an emotional peak moment. That was like even though we're in the quiet of space, it was like you're feeling the pain of that separation. So for me, it was like, okay, this needs to be like a big like musical like
Interstellar
you feel
type
that.
of stuff.
You feel that pain in the music.
Yeah.
And so it kind of built to this like big orchestral moment in that point in the cue. And so I brought that in, and they were like, it was completely wrong. Like that was not what they wanted. They wanted it to actually be the quiet of space and the unknown of what was coming. They wanted it to feel that way of like, you've left that behind and now it's kind of an unknown darkness, void sense. So basically the exact opposite of what I had just composed.
Nice.
And so I had to completely rethink it, but it ended up a lot better, I think, in the end because of that. So, all that to say, some other input is sometimes really helpful. You can feel really strongly about something, think you've got something right, and just someone else's perspective can course correct you if you don't have it quite right, and that's really, I think, important.
Yeah, and that's a very important example of the importance of subjectivity, because you can be the best composer in the world, but you're still probably working for someone else, like a game developer company or a movie company, and they have a vision and they want to do a certain type of a thing, and you're either serving that or not. You can be the best composer in the world, but you can still make like the wrong call in relation to what they want for it. So that's really important to understand, because a lot of people will go out into the world and write music for stuff, and they will get shot down or said, or told that, this wasn't the right thing. So it's not that you suck, but rather you're just like doing the wrong thing. So you need to be able to shift gears and do it again without a loss of enthusiasm and thinking you're the worst ever.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be able to come back after things like that and try to see their perspective, see the perspective of the feedback, and still give it your best shot on a second try or third try or however many it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we jump back to talking about your dad working at HP, you said in the 80s or sometime around that time.
That's when he started. I think it was either late 70s or early 80s, sometime around there. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was involved with technology, and at a pretty early time as well. How did that? Because obviously today you work a lot with music technology. How did that sort of influence your relationship with technology overall? Did it have an impact on you?
It did. So the other thing I should mention is my dad was an amateur musician, so he played piano, but not in a professional way. But his mother, my grandma, was a professional. Well, she still plays music, and she was for many years a professional singer, and she did play.
How old is she now?
She is in her upper 80s now, but she is still
Nice.
active musician. So she still plays in a.
Bless her.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. So she sung professionally, did play violin professionally very early in her musical career. So there is kind of a musical history in my family in that regard. But to go back to the technology thing, because I think my dad was used to these working on computers and whatnot, he got some pretty early setups with like some early digital like audio software and stuff. So we had, I think in the 90s, we had some kind of thing that MIDI set up where we were able to play things on a keyboard and use different sound sets on, I forget, I think it was like some kind of cakewalk software that we had back then. But yeah, I mean, I was able to experiment with that stuff. I remember in high school, and that was largely because of his interest in technology, that he was basically used to working with technology in that way. So I definitely did have probably a little bit more introductions to it than a normal person at that point. And, now technology's everywhere, but back then, to have a MIDI set up with samples and stuff was not super common back then.
No, that's super early, and that's like OG territory and like pretty like esoteric technology.
Yeah. So yeah, I had a little bit of it back then. I wouldn't say I made anything that sounded good, but I did at least have a little bit of an experience working with it. And very early like notation software from back then. Yeah.
Nice.
It did play an influence on it for sure.
Yeah, well,
yeah, he
I
encouraged
can
it too. Yeah, he encouraged it too. So I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very, very, very early, and to get used to the technology, that's usually like can be the toughest hump to get over. So it's good that you sort of got your hands dirty and sent some MIDI into a crappy sound card somewhere. So it's definitely important. Did you have any siblings?
I have two sisters, one older and one younger. So I'm the middle child.
And how did that manifest in your life?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think
it sounds like a pretty good deal to be like between two of the opposite gender, and maybe the better one. But because I don't know, usually the pattern tends to be that then the girls take care of the boy in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe part of it is I tend to see myself as kind of a mediator or peacemaker, and that might have been because I was sandwiched between them. So
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of a kid were you like growing up? Were you sort of more introverted, or how would you sort of describe your personality or traits?
So I think I was probably not that different than I am now as an adult, which would be I tend to be pretty quiet around people I don't know, pretty reserved. I'm definitely a very introverted person. I don't mind working by myself for long periods of time as a composer. That doesn't bother me at all. But once I get comfortable around people, I can be a lot more talkative or outgoing. I think in school, I remember we would do some of these. I think we did these classes where we would mock up historical events and stuff. So I remember probably being a bit animated for some of those once I was comfortable in a class. Like, impersonating certain
as soon as you were pretending to be someone else than who you are, then it's a different story.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I remember is, once I would be comfortable around someone, I could be a little bit more outgoing and crazy or energetic, but it would take me a while. It'd take me a while to get used to being around someone, um, just being comfortable with people. And I think I'm still kind of that way. You know, uh, if I'm in a sense, my job as a composer, especially working on the Civ series, where I have to work with so many different musicians, it's kind of brought me out of that a little bit, where I have to reach out to so many different people and work with so many people and meet so many different people. I guess I've had to grow in that way, where just get used to meeting someone and being comfortable with them and working on music with them. So I guess in that sense, I've grown a bit as a human, which is, I guess, nice to reflect on. But
Yeah, you can't be a composer
yeah,
in a dark dungeon anymore. You actually have to talk with
yeah,
people. Is
yeah.
there something collaborating with all of these musicians? Is there like a key lesson or a key trick that you've taken away from that? Like how do you build that connection with somebody, presuming they're like a new connection to you? Do you have any tips on how to get that relationship uh, going faster, or create trust, or maybe foster like a environment that is inducive for I don't know if that's the right word, but facilitates the kind of atmosphere that you're looking for the collaboration?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is just uh, showing who I'm reaching out to that I think their work is really valuable, is really interesting. So a big part of that is trying to see and read about what they've done, listen to their performances, just become familiar with them as a performer, as a person, as a musician, even before I reach out to them, so that there's some perspective there of, I've heard what you've done. I think it's really interesting and valuable, and and want to feature it on something that we're doing on a soundtrack. So I think that's a big part of it, is just showing someone that you're familiar with them a little bit and what they've done, uh, that you care in that sense. I think is important to begin a conversation. And then also just being a listener to what they are interested in conveying, especially for these musical traditions that we tend to feature. Some of them are just so focused on a particular time period or in a particular tradition, especially for Civilization VII, where I've just had to really lean into the suggestions of performers, and it kind of become a collaborative process of seeing what the performers think, combining that with my own research, and just mixing the two together, and really seeing ourselves as a team, and being a good listener to be able to listen to what they're interested in conveying. Um, I think those are all kind of important things that I've learned to do. I guess especially over the last 10 years, because Civ 6 is where I really first started working a lot with various performers from different traditions. So yeah, I mean, it's just been a journey of really learning how to be flexible, and being a good listener is probably the biggest things that I've learned how to do in working with these other musical traditions from different backgrounds and whatnot.
Yeah. It's oftentimes like, it sounds like very basic stuff on one level, but it's really interesting how much of a positive influence you can have on somebody by just letting them know that you've taken the time to get to know their work and actually put in time. People really seem to appreciate that, even with more limited experience, but it seems to be quite like I don't know. People seem to experience very little of somebody actually being interested in them and somehow invested time and effort into them. So it can sound like very basic stuff, but a lot of people don't do the basic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know sometimes I'll go to performers and I'll say something that like surprises them, where I'll be familiar with a certain like modes or certain pieces already that I've listened to, and they'll be surprised. They'll be like, "Whoa, how did you already know that?" It's like, well,
that's my job.
I really care about what you're doing, like this isn't just a little like side thing that I'm hoping to quickly get done. Like I'm invested in this, and what you have studied for your lifetime, basically. A lot of people don't realize that just as we've been working on our own music for our lifetime, so other musicians have focused on particular traditions and the nuances of those traditions for an entire life. And that has really high value that we can very easily forget. So just keeping that perspective, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I want to touch on your background when it comes to video games at a younger age. But before we get into that, I just wanted to get like a basic read on what your upbringing was like. Like, how would you sort of sum you growing up, like and I don't want you to, of course, to go into any details that you're not comfortable with, because sometimes people have hard lives and sometimes it's easier. But did you what was your upbringing like what was life like when you were growing up? Was it like safe and comfortable, or tough and dark, or how would you sort of sum it up?
I think I had a great childhood. I always felt so supported by my parents, but they weren't afraid to challenge me as well. And so I really appreciate both those things. And, just felt like if there was an opportunity that I was interested in, I'm just extremely thankful that usually I had the chance to pursue those interests. In terms of music, I started piano lessons, I think, when I was around 7 years old, and that was something that was forced on me. I did not enjoy it as a young child.
Sounds familiar. It's always piano, and it's always, I don't like this.
And it was not until I reached 6th grade, which I guess I would have been, I think that would be around 11, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it would be younger than 13. We had the opportunity in school to choose an instrument. And so I played a few different ones to try them out. I think I tried a French horn. I tried a violin, a viola. I tried a cello, and I did this goofy thing where I was able to like bow and slide my finger up the fingerboard and back down. And I thought, oh, that's cool. That's really fun. And so I decided cello's the one for me. And just something ignited in me musically after I took up that cello. I just really liked orchestra, and I really liked playing the cello. And I would practice, and I got like halfway decent at it, like in a little bit of time. So I think that was encouraging to me too. I remember getting into an honor orchestra that first year that I played, and I was like kind of surprised. I was like, oh, I guess I'm okay at this. And those little things encourage you, I think, especially when you're a kid, to keep going. Like, oh, someone thinks I'm okay at this. Maybe I should keep going and keep pursuing it. And I did. And I would say in those years of my life, I was more, as a musician, I was more a cellist than I was a composer, for sure.
And what sort of, if I may ask in between, what sort of music were you playing during this time? Like what sort of composers? Because I'm sure, like you said, you fell in love with the orchestra, but I'm sure it's also the music behind it. Was there something notable that made you go like, oh, this stuff is like, this is amazing?
It would be, so probably in my school orchestra, I don't remember too much of that middle school stuff. Cause it's beginner string writing and whatnot, but I do remember the honor orchestras and the all-state orchestra music. So the orchestral literature, and just really falling in love with, especially the great romantic works. I still remember there was an all-state orchestra I was playing in, and we did the Nimrod from the Enigma Variations by Elgar. And I just remember being in that cello section and us playing through that. And, oh my goodness, it was just so good. Just like, wow, this is amazing. And just loving it. Just that beauty of it. So yeah, and I would listen to a lot of that music as I started getting into it. I people had various, I think at that age, most people would be listening to, their favorite band or whatever. And I was listening to Dvorak and Rimsky-Korsakov and,
as you do. Very typical for that age.
And, and of course Bach too. I was learning the Bach cello suites, listening to a lot of cello recordings. So yeah, I mean, I think that really changed me as a musician. And the other aspect that was going on is, I still carried on with piano lessons. So I did have that background. And the thing about piano is I would often improvise instead of practicing the stuff that I was supposed to.
That's forbidden in classical music, as we know.
So yeah, I would improvise, I'd mess around, I'd try some things that I thought sounded good. And I think that was the little seed of composition that was planted in my life. And it was just like, I remember my parents encouraging me to write some of the things that I would improvise down, because I would repeat some of the improvisations. Like if I liked something, I'd kind of work with it a little bit. So you can see this is basically the composing process, right? At a very early in its very early stages. And so they encouraged me to try writing some of it down. And I did, in 8th grade. And that was not easy. I remember trying to notate things and write down this solo piano piece, and it was so hard for me back then to be able to figure out, well, what exactly am I playing, and how do I write this down? But yeah, I did it, and I ended up entering it in this kind of local composition contest, and as a kid, I probably didn't realize like not many people are writing down music and entering things. But as a kid, I was encouraged by that because it ended up winning at a few different levels. So, and I thought, oh, well, that's cool. Like someone thinks what I'm doing is valuable or interesting. And that encouraged me to keep doing that. So like these little steps along the way, especially as you're a kid, can make a big difference to encourage you to keep trying things. I think these little victories that I had as a kid, and these experiences, they definitely shaped me to like keep trying, to keep playing music, keep practicing my cello. Oh, someone thinks you're getting pretty good at that. Oh, I'll keep practicing. Maybe I can get even better. Oh, someone thinks that music you wrote is pretty interesting. Oh, maybe I'll keep trying to do that. You know, as a kid, I think it really makes a big difference having those positive experiences that encourage you to keep going. You know, of course, I didn't. Not everything's a victory. You know, I didn't win everything that I entered. I didn't get into every ensemble I auditioned for. But there were enough positives that I wasn't like beat down constantly. You know, I think that's the takeaway. I think if I'm looking back on it, that there were enough of these positive experiences, enough encouragement that I was encouraged to keep trying and keep doing it. And all at the same time, this deep love of music was developing within me as I was playing music. And I think that's another part of it. As I would say to anyone, you know, to get into music, you've got to love it. You know, it's just
too hard otherwise.
It's too hard otherwise. You know, you're gonna have too many setbacks. You just, at the end of the day, it's got to be about the music and creating something that you feel is meaningful and either expressive or beautiful or whatever you're trying to accomplish with that music. Like it's got to be, you've got to love it at the end of the day, and because otherwise, I don't see how you're gonna make it through. You're gonna eventually walk away from it because music is it's just too hard of a field to be in if you don't love it, I think.
Yeah, there has to be something that pulls you back. But yeah, I like what you also said, because a lot of it does go back to like rewards and punishment. I mean, even though like you said, you don't have to win all the time everything that you're participating, but as long as the general direction is positive, like the dominant energy is positive, then you keep going. It's very interesting what you said about the piano. So would you say it's that sort of format, the piano layout, that sort of unlocked your creative compositional mind? Did you when you were playing cello, did you ever sort of feel like composing, or did it really sort of unlock once you laid your hands on a piano, and did it make you sort of think differently about music?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing is when I think about my composing, even though I'm much more of a cellist than I am a pianist, I find composing on the cello just very awkward. I don't feel at home trying to write something sitting on a cello. There's just something about the piano in front of me. I guess all the possibilities right there on the keyboard, where I've just felt like that's where I'm at home as I experiment and try things. Of course, mixing that with ideas you might have in your mind and then trying those alongside sitting at the piano. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of this dual nature where the cello was able to open up a real love for music that I hadn't had before, but it was the piano that was able to open up the composing aspect of it in a weird way. So even though I didn't like it at first, so it's just kind of interesting. Yeah,
I think it makes sense, at least in my head. Like when I don't play the cello really, but obviously I have sample libraries and I have a keyboard, and when I'm playing with that, it's not like beckoning me to like necessarily compose music. I can write a melody line or pursue something like that, and that will then develop into like a composition. But it's very, the piano, there's something about the kind of the modularity of it. It's the same thing, but over and over again, up and down, and it sort of syncs very well with at least my mind in terms of how music can be sort of built and layered. So I think it's a super unique thing in that way. Like visually, there's something about it that really lends itself well for that compositional purpose.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to sort of understand your relationship with video games a bit more. And if we go back to your childhood or growing up, did you get to play video games back then, or what was your background with that?
I did. I wasn't a huge video gamer growing up, but I did have some games that I played. Probably my favorite games were actually racing games. So,
Nice.
my dad was very into racing, and he actually did amateur racing for a few years himself.
Oh, what sort of a class or
so
what type?
SCCA club racing. So, it was a proper race car.
So is this sort of rally or?
No, not rally. It was like road tracks. So I don't know if you're familiar with like Road Atlanta, that racetrack. No. But we lived in Georgia, so that was one that he would race at. So anyway, I was kind of familiar because of his interest in racing. I was familiar with it, and so I would try the racing games, and we had a little steering wheel set up and pedals and stuff.
I bet it was easy to get him to get on board with that.
Yes.
I can imagine.
And I remember them being like there was this one game, it was called Grand Prix Legends. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was a PC game. Sure. It was really hard. I mean, because it tried to be like a relatively accurate like version of 1950s Grand Prix, like Formula One cars, and they were so hard to like keep on the track. Like the physics engine in that game was just nuts. It was really hard, but
but in a way, like from what I know about the F1 cars from that time, it was difficult.
I think yes, I think that's
maybe it was
exactly
super
right.
Realistic.
Yes, I think it was. So anyway, all that to say, I played that. There were some other games I remember playing, mostly PC games. I can't think of any of them right now. But yeah, I would play things every now and then, but I wouldn't call myself a big gamer because I was playing cello, I was playing baseball. I had a lot going on in my life, so I didn't really have a lot of time to do games, and but I did like those racing games. I played a lot of them.
Did you ever have a thought back then that it would be cool to write music for those, or did that sort of come later?
That never crossed my mind back then, for sure. Like I definitely never thought about it.
Yeah. Well, I guess there were like 5 video game composers in the world back then or something. But it's a common thing. Like people they love games, but they don't really come to even think about, I guess somebody does have to make the music for those. But
yeah.
Back then, today is a different thing, but yeah. Cool. So when, so you're getting into composition, and during that time, when did you, because you were falling in love with music very heavily, was it always clear to you that this is what I'm going to do? Or was it still like just a clouded thing of, well, I like music, but I guess I need to do something else? Or was it always crystal clear that this is, what it's going to be?
It was not. It was not always crystal clear to me. I went through different stages where, I thought, I always joke with my kids. Like I tell them when I was in elementary school, of course, this was before I played cello and all that. I always joke with him. I said, I wanted to be a garbage truck driver. I thought the truck was just so cool. It's got all these levers and stuff on it. And
It sounds like our son. He loves garbage trucks. That's all he loves trucks of any sorts.
Oh, I mean, that was me. Like, it was garbage trucks, on the highway. I was pointing out the different big rigs and the brands and whatnot. So that was when I was young. And then through middle school, I was playing those racing games, right? I was seeing my dad doing racing. I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a race car driver or something. And then we'd go to an air show because we had an Air Force base right near us, and I'd see these really cool airplanes and see stuff. I was like, oh, be a fighter pilot. That sounds cool. So you're a kid.
There's a mechanized theme here. You love the equipment.
Yeah, I mean, there's just you're a kid. You're experiencing all these things. You think it's cool, and you don't know what you're doing. But all along that, music's there too. Then I was playing baseball, and I was like, oh, maybe if I work hard enough at this, I can be a baseball player. And so there was definitely a time where I thought maybe that's something I would pursue. And it was not until after my junior year in high school, I went to a summer camp where I was doing music every day, all day for 6 weeks. And it was primarily to play cello, but I was also able to write some music, get it read by the orchestra there. But I was just doing music, as part of this camp. And after that camp, I realized, like, this is what I need to pursue. I love it enough that I need to see if this can become what I do as my life's work, as my job. And so that's really when it pivoted, where I was able to focus and say, well, this is actually what I want to pursue in college and what I want to study. Like, I love it enough. And then I had to decide, well, am I going to study cello or study something else related to music? And that was a tough decision to make. And ultimately I thought, I wasn't bad at the cello. I was pretty good at it, but I just thought I'm probably not going to be good enough to make it professionally as a cellist. At least that's what I thought back then. Is that true? I don't know. Maybe I would have been good enough to make it somewhere as a cellist. But back then I thought, I don't think I'm gonna make it. So I decided to pursue more of the composing path eventually, was the decision I made. And just happened to run across a double degree program that would allow me to do composing and recording arts. And that was attractive to especially my parents because, a kid going into music, like, the job prospects are not always,
Clear.
Yes, it's not always clear. But having this recording arts background where you could get into anything related to audio certainly opens up job possibilities a lot. So they were really, a fan of that. And I was interested in it too. My dad had these early computer setups with recording gear, with MIDI and whatnot. So I had a little bit of introduction to some recording. And so that's what I ended up doing, was studying composing and recording arts. And that has kind of carried me through to my career now, where I'm kind of, I would say, not a common situation where I'm not afraid to go do a big recording session and set that up myself and And like I enjoy that as a recording engineer. I like mixing, a big orchestral mix. Like I'm not afraid to tackle that. But I'm also approaching it as a composer. So it's kind of that dual nature has definitely carried me has followed me through my career from that college background too, which is kind of interesting. I don't think that's common in our field. Usually, at least on the big projects, usually you get a lot of divided tasks being spread across a large team. But yeah, I enjoy the composing aspect and the recording and mixing aspect of it. So when I have time, I try to do both of them actually.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. Actually, I studied music composition with music technology, and when I showed up at the university, I learned that I was the only one in my age or my year. So I was like, where are my colleagues or whatever, other students? They're like, you don't have any. But my experience was very much, what you said resonates with that, because when I went to the composition department, they could barely like operate a projector or like a TV screen to, show something. And then when I went to the tech people, they didn't even know what a quarter note was, or, so this is a dramatization of that. But basically, like, we're not very far off. And I was like, these two things are so like far apart, and they need each other. But I was actually quite surprised about that, because I always saw music technology as a tool for me to not only bring my compositions to life, but also in many ways, like, the technology can be a part of the composition process as well. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't understand that. I think a lot of the composition people were sort of almost anti-technology in many ways. But I'd actually be very interested in hearing how you use technology when you're composing. Obviously, because you mentioned that you write your scores. I don't know if you do that manually or the computer these days, but you still presumably, do you write your music first on a sheet, or do you actually like go into the DAW and start writing with sample libraries? Like, what is the process like for you? Obviously, you probably have the budgets to do the real recordings with the orchestra as well these days. But when you're scoring, do you just work with notes, or I should say scores, or do you actually do that with sample libraries?
It's really a mixture of a lot of different things, and it depends on the ensemble that I'm writing music for. So if it's an orchestral thing that I'm writing, yes, it's always a score first. I've tried doing a little bit of working directly in the DAW first, and it just, for me, it just doesn't. I'm just not able to write in the same way that I am with a score in front of me. Now I just do it directly in the computer, so I use Sibelius. Every now and then I'll handwrite ideas that I have in pencil and paper, but I don't do like full scores in pencil and paper. Just the time. I've just not really ever done that, honestly. It would be an interesting experiment to do that one of these days. It's just, but usually it's a time issue, because then I'd have to transfer it to the computer, and so usually, yes, for orchestral work, I am working in a score first. Then I'll bring it over to the DAW and mock it up, and that is a very helpful part of the process, because you can catch things before the recording session that maybe you might have miscalculated, or things that you want to revise or things that don't sound quite the way that you thought they would. And so usually that's part of the process. I'll do the mock-up, maybe revise a few things, update the score from that mock-up. So it's both really, a back and forth kind of thing. There are some other ensembles that I've worked with where they don't read Western notation. And so we'll talk about arranging a certain song in terms of structures, whether it's a lyrical structure so that we know that these lyrics have this particular melody line. So, all right, well, let's do this kind of verse, 2 of these verses, and then this set of lyrics, and they know the music that goes along with that. So we can talk about like sections of a piece in that way. And then we can say, okay, well, here we want it to be building, here we want it to be less. So just talking about like structures in that way is another way that I've done composing and arranging, which keeps it a lot more open. In our Western kind of music tradition, we've become pretty accustomed to, at least in like a classical setting, to having like a score be like the final word, I guess. Like what's in the score is what it needs to be, and the score needs to be super detailed and tell the performers everything they need to know to perform it what the composer has in mind. That's kind of the mentality of like Western, where we've gotten, at least. It was not always that way, of course. But that idea is really not the way it is in so many other musical traditions that I've worked with, where improvisation is a core element, and leaving room for improvisation is very important. And you're talking more about general structures of music, general flow, general this goes to this, but the nuances of every little note are not predetermined. Those can be what the performer decides on the fly. Just that improvisational aspect of music. When I'm working with some other traditions, I try to leave it open for that. And so those don't warrant me writing like a detailed part out. Like I say, like I've done a few things where I'll work with this Bansuri player, and I know that he's just a wonderful improviser. And so I'll just leave like a chord open in whatever ensemble that is accompanying him. And I'll just say, feel free to do a little improvisation here. And then I figure it out later, like what I want to do. Because if I tried to write him something, it would come out, it just wouldn't be as good, basically. So, that I think that's part of what I've learned is also knowing who you're working with, who you expect to be recording. And if you know that they're kind of coming from that improvisatory aspect, or even certain elements are going to be improvised, leaving room for those. But when it comes to like an orchestra score, obviously that's got to be super detailed. Otherwise you're going to be just destroying your session time, giving them dynamics, and you don't want to do that. So I just try to be sensitive to what the final ensemble or performer is going to be in terms of how I prepare the arrangements or the compositions.
Yeah, it's I can imagine that it's a bit like, let's say you're writing a movie or directing a movie, and then you find the right actor, but that the actor, they have that sort of a mojo or magic in there. You don't want to get in the way of that, because they also are going to interpret the script in a certain way and the situation, and you want to help them get into the position where they can do that magic. And if it's too forced, and you don't let them find the groove that they can sort of, you know, fall into or sort of snap into place, then you're gonna lose that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, there's cases. I remember there was one time I was recording this ney player, and I think I had him play something where I had a click track going. And
he said, "What is this heresy?" What?
Well, yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing about that is, of course, he's used to playing very tight rhythmically with percussionists or with other players. But the idea of this like rigid metronome going in the background, there was just something about it where he felt very limited. And I noticed that his playing changed. The ney has these wonderful like nuances of how a player will bend things and go from one note to another, and these little like ornamentation, and especially in Arabic style playing. And a lot of that just like disappeared when the click track was in there. And then I took the click track out, and he just felt the freedom to have that in there. And it wasn't like he was playing out of time or anything. It was still in time. But he felt more free to add it in. And I think that's, you know, that just shows you the kind of sensitivity that we have to have as musicians, as composers, and recording engineers too, right? A good recording engineer will notice that and will be able to respond so that they have a successful outcome from the session. And, you know, just being able to be flexible is such an important part of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Going back to the compositional process, I always find this very interesting to think about composers who write, you know, straight onto notes, you know, sheet music, because for me, like the actual sound of the composition has become inseparable in a way. Like I would say, like when I was younger, I sort of thought that the magic of the music was only in the notes, like it's only in the melody, the harmony, like the abstracted information. But then I started working on my own music and realized that it sounds really bad. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And that's when I sort of fell in love with sound, or first got curious about sound, and now, you know, have fallen in love with it. And now I would say that it's kind of impossible to separate that from the compositional process of, you know, writing actual harmonies and all the abstracted, you know, information that is in a composition. So for me, this is why I write in the DAW with sample libraries. Obviously, I don't have access. Well, I have access to players, but I don't have budgets for players. But I would find it very difficult to compose without the actual immediate sound sort of loop, getting a response with something that I'm working on. And even if I know exactly the kind of articulations and expressions that I want to, let's say like a string section to have, like I know what those are called and I can notate those down, but it's still, even when I know what they are and I'm writing it down, it's not quite enough for me to like catch the end result. Like I feel like I need to sort of hear it while I'm composing. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you very strongly always hear the end result in your head, or do you ever feel like, oh, I wish I could hear that? Or do you intentionally leave some of the space that you talked about for the, you know, happy accidents, or you know, finding the right players and giving players space, you know, to do their thing? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the direct connection or correlation to what you're mentioning there is like in the orchestral setting, right, where you're kind of writing with the samples, and you know, I mean, especially if you know that you're not going to have the opportunity to record a live orchestra, I would say that approach makes a whole lot of sense, because what you what you have in mind might not speak very well in the samples. In a sense, the samples are your player. They are your orchestra. And if they're not going to be good at playing a certain thing, it's good to know that right up front so you can kind of cater the composition to that. I mean, in reality, that's all in order for our music to speak well, that's what we're always doing as a composers. We're trying to write parts or compose parts that will fit a certain instrument in a certain way that they can actually be playable in a way that that communicates, right? So, I mean, that doesn't mean we can't write hard things. We can write really hard things. We can push the limits of instruments, but it has to be within a certain framework of, okay, well, this is actually possible on an instrument. And so that's really what you're doing with the samples. Like, some things are just not possible. So you're making sure that it fits your final ensemble. And I would say that's basically my same approach. But when it comes to working with the score versus in the DAW directly, just for me, you know, I understand there's a lot of composers who are like me and they start with the score, and there's a lot of composers who are more like you and they're working in the DAW. But for me, what I found is there's a certain imaginative element where I am thinking of a certain thing in my mind of what either an orchestral accompaniment or a certain texture, or a certain sound, a certain blending of sounds. And it's a lot easier for me to see all of the scores, all of the stave lines on a big score, and kind of try to put that on a page. It's easier for me to see that on a page and try to imagine it as I'm sitting at a piano too, than it is to try to, like, that's a faster process for me than to put it into a DAW and then go back. Like, it's just, and it opens up my mind to, I think, things that I wouldn't necessarily think of if I was directly in the DAW as well, in terms of, it's especially on like the accompanying, like, orchestral textures and colors. Like, I think I'm able to think a lot more creatively about that when I have a score in front of me instead of a DAW. But that's just, I mean, that's just how I've worked for so long that it's just what I'm used to. But I've heard composers who work in a DAW come up with incredible orchestrations and orchestral textures and whatnot. So they're obviously used to it in a way that I'm not in terms of their composing. So, you know, you just have to realize, I think what happened to me is I tried a few pieces working directly in a DAW, and I just realized, like, I just didn't like them as much, basically. I felt like there wasn't as much depth or detail, or it just, the whole process wasn't, I just didn't find it as compelling. And so I haven't really done it too much since I realized that, you know, something like 15 years ago. So,
but that's a really good point, because it is like a very different process. Like, when I'm composing in the DAW, you're kind of already also doing the arrangements in a sort of deeper sense, and you're also mixing simultaneously. So it's like if it's like a well, you're sort of fully in the well all the time, trying to do all of it simultaneously. So that's a really good point. Also, what you said about speed is actually very interesting now that I think about it. And I realize I never thought about this before, which is that I do, like, when I'm composing, I do find it slow to have to pull up, you know, all the sections of the string section and the brass and the woodwinds and whatever else. Like, I do realize that my mind is composing far faster than what I physically can actually do. And I find like I need to really try and keep up with it and try and keep certain things in my head. And obviously then I quickly sketch something not to forget it. But now that I think about it, it is interesting that the speed is a very big component there. And also maybe the most interesting thing, which you said, was the imaginary component of it, or the imagination, because it reminded me of like reading a book versus like doing a movie. Like what I'm doing now is basically try and like do the whole movie in one go. Basically, I am the actors, I am the cameraman and the director of photography and the director and the lighting person. You're trying to do the end result like right now, versus you're sort of like reading a book, which is you get the core of it, but you're also like imagining the details to a certain extent, and it's kind of this like beautiful open field of creativity in a way. So I also really, really like that. Not sure what I'm going to practically do with that thought at this stage, but it sounds kind of like very, very fascinating, at least as a concept.
Yeah, I think at least when it comes to orchestra music, for me, like being able to see that full, full page of the staves, and it just helps me see a snapshot of things a lot faster than I can. Like I'm visually seeing what I hope it will sound like in a way that I can't really get in a DAW. Like I can play back what I'm doing in a DAW and hear it. I could open up the piano roll, but there's so much overlapping, in the piano roll. Even if I had it color coded, you're not getting the same information as clearly as you are on a score page. And I think that is probably one of the big reasons why I like doing orchestral music just directly in the score is I can just see what's going on across the whole orchestra so easily on a score page, in a way that I'm not able to in the DAW. But again, like I said, I always want to say this with a qualification. There are some people who I think can see that, like in a piano roll, and they can read that thing and they know exactly what's going on. I think I've heard like a story like Hans Zimmer reads piano roll like it's nothing to him. I forget where I ran across that. I'm sure it's true. Because if that's the way that you've been working for so many years, you just kind of get attuned to it. And so, it's just, we all work different ways, but I always like to also think of the great composers of the past and just think about how incredible they are. We have all these tools at our disposal to be able to hear what we're doing, to easily notate things, to do mock-ups. And look at these great orchestral works of the past. And they were working with pencil and paper and have just the most detailed, incredible orchestrations, and just the creative thought behind those parts that they wrote for the orchestral instruments to make things come together. And they didn't have any of these tools. That's always inspiring for me to think about, is like, some of the most amazing orchestral works, they didn't have any of these tools, and they were able to write this incredible orchestra music that still inspires us to this day. That's inspiring and challenging to me.
So basically, you don't want to walk into the studio knowing that you pissed off Bach, or he's not going to turn in his grave and be like, "Oh, Geoff, why didn't you just take the pen and paper, forget the libraries?" Yeah,
it's more just thinking like, if I don't know, if Debussy could write those kind of orchestrations, like what we hear in La Mer, the detail and the nuance and the colors that he brings out of the orchestra, that he could imagine those, write them in with no mock-ups, with no samples, nothing to test it out beforehand, just the imagination and the creativity of it. That, to me, that's the challenging aspect as a composer, to think that way creatively about the orchestra. Still today, even though I have all these tools at my disposal, to still come back to it and think about it in that open canvas kind of way, that things could be combined in a way, and you're still thinking about it that way, kind of in a, it's not a very concrete thing, right? You're not hearing it immediately. You're just imagining what it might sound like. I think there's real value in that. And I think that's part of what comes by working in a score first. So,
no, for sure. I'll be definitely meditating on that. I can believe that Hans can read MIDI roll, because that's what I do. He's done it a lot more. And also, like, you can read waveforms to an extent. You can't detect exact pitch, but you worked a lot with waveforms, and as you accrue a lot of time, you definitely can say definitive qualities about the sound. You can sort of know the general range, and you can know certain qualities about it. So that's
for
also
sure. For sure.
But that's really fascinating. I love the idea that there's the imagination component there. I don't know how I'll integrate that into my work process, but I'll definitely be meditating on that. And also, I do like the idea that working purely in the sort of, well, not purely, but maybe in the abstracted information imaginary space is actually conceptually very fascinating to me. And I don't actually know why I've never thought about this from that perspective before. So thank you for bringing that up, because I've never made that sort of connection. But I'll start thinking about how I can maybe do some of that. I wanted to ask you a bit about sample libraries, because this is actually the thing that I'm doing now professionally the most, like reviewing sample libraries and virtual instruments. I wanted to hear about your kind of general thoughts about the field and the developments in the technology. But are there any sort of like notable companies that come to mind whose stuff you love and why?
I kind of use all of them. I have, over the years, I've gotten so many different libraries from all of the different sample library companies that I wouldn't say there's one that's better than the other. They're all kind of, I'll use an instrument here, and there, and I'll mix and match different ones, and some sound better, but they're harder to work with. Some are easier to work with. So if I need a quick mock-up, I'll use those. So, it's all across all over the place in terms of the libraries. But I've certainly accumulated quite a few over the years. That's for sure.
I can believe that, because I don't even have enough hard drives to put everything on somewhere. So I can imagine you probably just get like NFRs all the time or copies sent to you. You've obviously seen the progression of things in terms of what we had, I don't know, even in 2010. That's, roughly when I started to get, well, maybe a bit before that, but started to get into it. And sample libraries were, there was a lot of good stuff out there, but it was definitely not what it is today. Do you have any thoughts about the technological development and maybe points especially related to realism and playability and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how things have developed over the last, especially 15 years. I know, back then, a big part of the problem was being able to to read the data fast enough off of disks and process it. So the main limitation was your CPU and then your disk streaming bandwidth. And so once solid state drives showed up, that started to solve it a little bit, but people would still offload samples to like other PCs or other computers to have like a slave computer set up where you're running different libraries on different computers in order to run all these samples so that you have the best sounding samples for your mock-up. And I was actually running a setup like that even this year until I finally upgraded my PC. Because I'm just this guy where if something's working and it's getting the job done, especially if I'm on deadlines and whatnot, I just don't want to mess with it. Like, it's just not worth any kind of upgrading. If it's working, if it's sounding, if it's doing what I need it to do and it's stable, I'll just leave it in place. And so I did, but I finally upgraded because like the Windows 10 support was kind of going away, and so I finally kind of upgraded my computer system. But anyway, all that to say, the hardware requirements of these sample libraries to sound good, they are not becoming as much of an issue now with the new CPUs and the new hard drives being able to stream just incredible amounts of data off the hard drives. I mean, it just blows away what it was 15 years ago, in a way that we never would have imagined back then. And so all that to say, you can do these super realistic things. Like I remember when the Hollywood Strings library came out. I don't even know when that was. It was a long time ago, the first one. And it sounded really good. It had some amazing ideas in it in terms of the legato features that were super realistic at the time. And I think it's still a great library, but it was so resource intensive on the computer system that like, I just remember having problems with it, like crashing things. And I remember other composers that I was working with would try to put it in their sessions and just things would crash all the time because it couldn't handle it. And that's not really an issue at all anymore. It's like not a problem to pull up the most powerful legato patch where you can crossfade between different layers of vibrato and different layers of velocity all at the same time. You know, I think if you think about that particular patch, it's like a crazy number of wave files must be streaming at the same time. I think it's like 32 or something like that, just for a single instrument. So you can crossfade between the different layers of vibrato and velocity. But it's not a problem anymore. It used to be a huge problem, but now it's not. And so the level of realism that we're able to get is certainly much higher now with more ease than it was in the past. But with that said, there's still certain things that we definitely can't get out of a sample library that we can get from a live player. I especially think like woodwind parts, solo woodwinds, any kind of like solo wind instrument, I find is especially difficult to have a sample mimic. I mean,
that's really interesting because that I've found that it's based on my experience that it's the easiest out of the brass string woodwind like trifecta to sample. At least the ones that I've used, like I was like, oh, this like seems easier somehow. So, but obviously I've only looked at it from a perspective of like using and reviewing this kind of stuff. But I've thought about it. Like, is it obviously your experience is the counter opposite? But I've wondered, like, is it the airiness of it? Is it like, because a lot of woodwinds are kind of quite simple when you start analyzing the basic waveform of it. Like they usually have like a not a sine like sort of fundamental tone, but it's sort of simpler. And then you have like a bunch of air there. And I wonder if that the perception of the air, if you capture it well, that it will sort of contribute to this perception of realism. But
yeah. I think for me, I think it's not the sound of the instrument itself. It's the transitions and the expressiveness of it. So like with wind instruments, especially woodwinds, those transitions between the notes and what a player's doing with their breath, to mimic that in a sample is it's just really, really hard. Because like, how are you, if a player's going from quiet to soft, how are you going to seamlessly do that in a solo woodwind instrument without it being heard? To me, it seems almost impossible, actually. Whereas you compare that to a string section, there's a much more homogeneous sound. They're already kind of combining, right? You already have 12, 16 violins playing together. They're already, as a section, live, kind of mixing themselves. So to take different layers and mix between different dynamic levels and stuff, that, to me, that's a much more straightforward process that could be done with not noticing as much versus a single player. Like even the solo string instruments, I don't find any of them convincing for the same reason. It's like the nuances of vibrato and transitions between notes and all of that. It always sounds fake on a solo player. It's just like, you just can't, like, unless it's like a really simple line, maybe you could get it by. But a real player is just, there's a nuance to it that is just not there. And I don't think ever could be there, actually.
that's
with the solo players. Yeah.
That's a good point. I was primarily thinking about ensembles, but I still, I think there are a couple of solo things as well that sound pretty good. But this is also like, we're also talking about levels here, because you are a professional composer who has worked a lot with real instruments. So you also have like a different take on what passes as realistic versus
that's probably true. Yeah.
then you're also going to have somebody who is like, maybe they could even be a professional composer, but maybe they just work with sample libraries. Let's say it's like a hybrid film scoring type of a person, and maybe they don't have that same standard or experience or even necessity of realism. And then you obviously have your average person from the street who's never gonna maybe hear the difference. Depends on the person, but yeah, it's a good point. I would actually love to sort of hear some, or hear you sort of, maybe not necessarily here, but like if you think about some sample libraries that are like good from your perspective or your experience, I would actually love to hear that, to kind of understand a bit more about like what it is that you like and what you think is good and what is missing, just out of personal interest and curiosity, because I do work a lot with them and review them especially. So it would be interesting to build a better understanding of what what you like. And
yeah, I mean, I will say that, I mean, I could open up like my sample drive and just go through the things that I tend to lean towards, but because I'm working so much with, I'm able to work with live ensembles, it's kind of one of those things where I think a few years back, I got a template set up for my orchestra mock-ups, and I haven't really, it was a case of like, okay, this is this is good enough for what I need to do because I know I'm going to be recording eventually. So all that to say, what I have is probably not as up to date as what it sounds like you probably have in terms of samples. So, I mean, I'm using, for strings, I'm using still using the Hollywood strings for some stuff, which I think it might be called something else now. I think it's like, they changed the name, but it's still the same samples. It might be like Opus Orchestra or something, but I also will occasionally use the Vienna Instruments samples, which are very old, but they are so easy to work with and so quick. So sometimes those show up. Sometimes I'll pull up some Spitfire samples, whether it's strings, brass, or woodwinds. I still work a lot with the Vienna Instruments woodwinds because I find they're just so easy to work with for a mock-up. And then I have just so many not orchestral samples. Just if I've needed specific instruments where I'm either need to mock up or I know I'm not even going to be able to record them. So certain percussion instruments or things like that, like I have libraries that are specific to that, like a lot of non-Western instruments, especially percussion instruments. So all over the place. Yeah.
Cool. So basically, if we jump back on to the journey of how you kind of shifted into the industry that you're in now. So you graduated from, you did your bachelor's and then you did your master's in recording arts and sciences.
So I did it was a bachelor's and master's in composition, and the recording arts was a bachelor's.
Ah, okay, yeah. So I got those the other way around. Oh yeah, I just read wrong apparently. Cool. So where in there? So you already knew, okay, this is going to be what I'm going to do. You knew that you wanted to get into composing music now, but how did you have any idea of how that's going to like translate into money? Did you know the kind of path in composition that you want to be doing? Because what you do now is kind of like a hybrid of like coming from the sort of classical world, but also moving into the video game, the entertainment industry. So how did you make that shift happen, and when did you realize that was even an option? How did you end up on this lane?
Yeah, I think it was just I was open and flexible to kind of anything at that time, and really even now. So my first semester at Peabody, as a freshman, I was looking at, well, who's on my dorm floor that I can write a piece of music for? And there were two other cellists, so I wrote a cello trio. And that kind of approach of like, well, what's in front of me that's available that I can work with, that I can do, has kind of been my mindset through all of this. And so I wasn't specifically pursuing a career in game audio when I went to Peabody. I just knew that I loved music. I knew that I wanted to do music in some way or another. And whatever my path ended up being, I was open to what would come my way. And I didn't know what that would be at that time. And so fast forward a few years along that process, and I had to do an internship at a recording studio as part of my recording arts degree. And it was at that studio that I met some of the game developers in the Baltimore area. They came there to record a choir like choir parts to a theme they were writing. And they did not come from kind of a compositional like background that I had. So they weren't used to writing like the sheet music parts. And so they needed someone to kind of take those and prepare them to have intelligible sheet music for the singers to sing from. And so I was just an intern, but I said, hey, I can do that. So I took their MIDI, turned it into a score, added the lyrics, and basically that all went pretty well. And it started a relationship there where they got familiar a little bit with my work. I got familiar with what they were doing with their music. And, I thought, well, this is something that is a possibility. Like I might be able to keep doing this after I'm done studying when I get out of school. And it looks pretty interesting and something where I could continue to do music and do something interesting. So I just kept that idea open. It's the same, like that same idea that when I was a freshman and there were two cellists and I wrote a cello trio, like that same idea, like, oh, well, here's some game developers. Maybe I can help with music and audio for that. Like that's an interesting thing that's kind of here. So when I graduated, was looking for stuff to do. Of course, I reached out to them to see if there was anything. There weren't any openings. There wasn't anything for me at that time. I ended up doing just random stuff. I did like an independent film score, again, through that recording studio that I'd interned at. I was a boom mic operator on a film shoot. I was just trying to piece together whatever came to me. I was open, like whether it was a recording engineer, a composer, sound design, like, if it came in my lap, okay, I'm interested. Like I'll just, whatever comes my way, I'll just try to do it the best I can and we'll see what path opens up before me. And, it's just one of those things where 4 months out of school, I got a call from Firaxis and something changed. Some staffing changed and they said, hey, we're interested in maybe having you come on here as a sound designer and writing some music too. And I said, okay, wow, that's amazing. So I took them up on that interest there, and I worked in-house for about 1.5 years, doing a lot of sound design work, did some composing work. We ended up doing, that was Civ 5. We worked a lot on the Civ 5 music. Same thing happened in that development, actually, where they were thinking about recording orchestra. They had never done live orchestra recording for their game soundtracks before Civ 5. And I said, hey, I know how to do orchestration. I've worked with orchestras a little bit. Let's make this happen. We can record some of this. And things just kind of came together where the publisher had an orchestra contractor that they had connected with. We were able to connect with. And so for Civ 5, it all just came together that we were able to have more live orchestra recording. And so it's like, you just try to like see these little opportunities that come up and just make the most of them as they arrive, is kind of what I've tried to do through my career. And so far it's been okay. But I will say, there's certainly been surprises. So I was at Firaxis for about 1.5 years, and I'm sure you've heard the game industry can be very volatile. Lots of layoffs happen. I was part of a layoff. But we were still finishing up Civ 5. And we still had music that had to get done. And so they basically immediately contracted me back like the next week so that we could keep working on the project. I mean, that's just the way it goes in this industry. And again, there's that same theme of like, okay, I was let go of my job. I could be like upset and not want to talk with them or whatever, but I'm just open to whatever comes my way. Okay, you want to contract me back again? Sure, let's do it. Let's finish the soundtrack and get this done and make it sound great. Like that works for me.
Before you even leave the building, they're like, "Hey, by the way, would you like to sign this contract? We want to contract you."
It wasn't that different than that, to be honest. I mean, it was. I remember after. If you imagine the way that a layoff goes, that is basically what happened here. Like, it was about like 25 of us were called into a room together, and they let us know that our positions were like terminated, and like we had to get escorted out of the building and stuff like that. Like it was all like exactly what you've heard about for being a layoff. And but before I left the building, the guy who was our like audio producer, he was like, yeah, I think we could have stuff for you like
tomorrow,
down the pipe or whatever. So, and sure enough, like I mean, it wasn't a few days where like we knew we had stuff that still needed to get done, and so that's just how it worked out. And I've been an independent contractor ever since then, which has worked out pretty well. So that's another thing where like I don't know if I would have done that on my own, but I was kind of thrown into it. But it's ended up being a positive thing for me just due to the flexibility of being a contractor. So
yeah, definitely benefits to that model. And I would probably say it. I mean, I think at least in my limited experience, it's more common to be contracted than to actually hired into a company.
Yeah.
And
it's even moving more that way. I know it used to be pretty common to have most of your sound design team, your audio team be in-house, but even that is now getting more and more moved to be contractors, which I actually don't think is necessarily a positive thing for game development as a whole. But, it's just the way it's going, I guess.
Yeah. Briefly wanted to touch on kind of the academic route into music, because someone might be watching or listening and wondering whether they should go and do it. So what was your experience like going through like the musical training in the academic context? And is that something you would recommend to somebody? And if so, why?
For me, it was, I would say, an incredibly important part of my musical growth. The way that I was challenged and the things that I learned about just composition, about music, it's just been so important to my growth as a composer, as a musician. I definitely would not be where I am today without that college education experience that I had.
Is there, briefly interjecting here,
Yep.
Is there, like, I know this is kind of an absurd question to try and maybe boil down your compositional, like studying to something as simple, but was there anything, because I also studied music composition, and while I did learn things, I never had like a big sort of aha breakthrough in terms of like discovering a new technique or a way of looking at something. I basically just got more of a language to describe the stuff that I sort of already knew. Maybe that's a testament to my not very good studying, but is there something? Was there like a big, if you had to kind of take like a notable mention of like a breakthrough you had in composition, was there anything like that? And what would that be?
I don't think there was a single breakthrough that I would have had, but it was just, we did a lot of score study. So we had, music theory classes where we would do score study. We would learn about different forms, learn about different development. We would analyze pieces of music. And just that whole process for me as a composer, it really, that's not something that I had done before. And I don't imagine it was something I would do on my own if I wasn't introduced to it. But now it's something that, of course, I would do and still do, actually. So as I have time. So, I mean, it's like these small little things, I think, that build a foundation or keep building a foundation for musicianship that are part of it. So, analyzing music, looking at music that maybe I wouldn't listen to and seeing what's going on there, what the composer was doing, all of that. I mean, we did that too. I mean, pieces of music that I might hear and maybe wasn't necessarily a fan of, but learning what was going on in the composition process, why the composer composed that way. That's a huge part of growing as a musician is understanding those things, I felt at least. And alongside that was having access and learning all these recording things that, I mean, the recording facilities at Peabody are really, really pretty amazing. Like the same things that I was able to work on there, the same microphones and mic pre's and board and whatnot. When I go into a studio now, a lot of the gear is the same, that high-end studio gear. So I'm familiar with that, familiar with some microphones, microphone setups, mixing. So, I mean, are those things that I could learn on my own? Yeah, for sure. Could I do score study on my own? Definitely. Could I read on my own? Definitely. Could I do recording? That's a little bit trickier because those microphones, unless you pay for some studio time, you're not going to get to work with them directly. But you can still learn the basics of like microphone setups and what certain microphones would be used by some recording engineers and stuff. Like those are, I would say, yes, those are things you could all learn on your own. But the environment of being able to focus on that for a set number of years where you're just like, that's your focus and you're just really growing and learning and focusing. There's nothing like that. At least I don't think there is. Like I can't imagine that growth would have happened without that experience. Just being able to focus on like learning recording, trying different composition things, having pieces read and performed without like getting paid. Like I'm not trying to please a director. I'm not trying to please a production team. I'm just trying things. I'm learning how to work with musicians. That process in that safe environment, educational environment where it's not high stakes. It's not a gig that you're going to lose. I think there's a lot of value to it. Where you can grow a lot as a musician.
Yeah, that communal aspect is a big one, and the environment, and also it's not that, like, I think about this a lot these days, that there's like an abundance of information already, and the information that's not the thing you're paying for, but in many cases you're paying for the curation of information, like your professors, your lecturers, whoever they are. They have a lot of experience and they can help you focus your attention on things that you're supposed to be looking at, and showing you the information that is actually relevant, and because the information is not really the issue. It's how to look at it and how to use it and what to focus on, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean, I would say, so all that to say, I don't think there was like a single aha moment. However, there was a single aha moment for orchestration. There was one composition lesson where I was working with Christopher Theophanides, and we looked at the second movement of La Mer. And he just took me through that piece, pointing out all of the orchestration nuances and details, and just the mastery of it that Debussy used in that movement in particular. And I was just completely blown away by all of it, and really challenged by all of it. Still refer to that piece today when I'm like looking at orchestration and brushing up on some things and just like revisiting, well, what did Debussy do there, and how did he do that again? And that I'll never forget that lesson. It was just incredible.
Was there like a notable takeaway, or was it just the whole thing was so immaculately constructed that, what was it, if you had to sort of try and condense it into a lesson?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I would have to just open up the score and revisit it again. There's just so many little details in there about what was going on. Yeah.
Cool. Briefly touching on the creative process, you seem like a very inspired person. Like you seem to have this kind of I don't know, inner flow of creativity in you. You don't seem like somebody who maybe struggles with finding inspiration for music, but maybe I'm wrong. But have you had periods where you've had like a creative block, or you've been struggling with like coming up with material, and how did you get past that?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly time periods where I feel like the ideas I'm coming up with are not great or good. And I think a big part of that is just to be able to keep going, to keep writing something, to keep trying things. And I'll be honest, a big part of that is having a deadline. So, if you know you have to have something done by a certain day, you know that you need to get a certain amount done on this day and tomorrow and the day after. And so when that writing becomes hard, when you feel like you're not getting somewhere well, if you don't have a deadline, it's easy to just walk away and not want to keep trying and not work through that hard aspect of like, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Things aren't sounding good. So I'm just going to step away from it and not think about it. Like when you have a deadline, you don't have that option. And so you have to sit through it and work through that hardness and be okay with it and keep going. And I think for me, since so much of my work over the last 15 years has been on soundtracks, I have had deadlines. I have had to keep to a schedule. And I think that's one thing that has definitely inspired me to work through time periods where I feel like maybe my ideas haven't been good. I think a big part of it is to be able to find the space to be able to be okay with it being hard, but to not give up. I think that's a big part of it. Like, I'm not coming up with ideas, but because I have this deadline, I'm going to sit down and keep working through it. Like, I think that's what the deadline does, is it inspires you not necessarily to come up with good ideas, but to keep trying, because you have to keep trying. So I think if you don't have a deadline, that same mindset can still apply, right? You can still say, all right, this is hard, but I'm going to keep trying and keep working through it. You could, like, the same mindset is still there. Like, you just, like, don't walk away from it if you're not having good ideas. Like, just keep trying and see what happens. And you will get through it, you will. I remember when I was working on the Beyond Earth soundtrack, I knew I had recording sessions coming up, and I had a lot of pieces that I needed to get done. And I had, I think I had my second daughter was about to be born, or she had just been born. I had a 3-year-old in the house. Like, it was really hard finding the time to focus and to get music like going. But I wasn't moving the recording session date. Like, it was already set. I knew when the music had to be ready by. And I was able to a friend of mine had this cabin way out in the woods of West Virginia. And I was talking with them back then, and they said, you can feel free to use that as a little composing location if you want. And so I took them up on the offer, and I went out there. It wasn't very long. My wife graciously was able to watch the kids for a few days there. Usually we're kind of tag teaming things. Like, we're very, very team oriented kind of parents, where we're juggling duties kind of equally in that sense. But she took the kids for, like, I think it was 2 days that I went out there. And this was the kind of place where, like, there's you don't even have like cell service. And I'll tell you, that was so good for me, because I knew I had these 2 days and there were no distractions there. I didn't have like internet. I didn't have cell service. I was there to write music, to sit down. Like, that was the goal. And I think I wrote some of my favorite pieces on that soundtrack when I was out there. Just the ability to, like, that's what I mean about, like, creating that space. Like, did I have to go to that cabin to create that space? Probably not. But it made it a lot easier to make that space where you can just, like, everything is toned out and it's just your creative mind and a blank page, and see what happens, and a deadline. Like, I know I need to walk out of here with something. Like, I can't walk out with nothing. And
you can't tell that to your wife.
Yeah.
It's like, how did it go? She's like, there's complete Armageddon back home, and you're like, well, I didn't really write anything, and I just slept. Yeah. She's like, okay. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, but, creating those environments, it's so hard, right? We are so just inundated with things to distract us and fill us. And, a lot of companies now are using these messaging systems like Slack and whatnot, where you can get a message and you're instantly like, oh, I guess I need to respond. Like, it's so easy to get pulled away from our work. And maybe for some work, that's okay. But for creative work like what we do, for music work, it is so important to be able to create that space where it's just us and our mind and our music without getting pulled away from it, right? Like, that is just so important. And I think that's another part of working through hard things, where you feel like you're stuck. When we feel like we're stuck, it's so easy to just do something else. I'll be distracted by something else. I'll go do this, or I'll scroll some kind of social media, or but that's not how you work through it, in my experience. You work through it by creating the space and working. Like, that's what you got to do. Yeah.
It's very true that you technically, you can say, like, if you could say, oh, just don't use your phone and don't do this and don't do that. But it's when those things are not an option in the environment that you're in, you don't have to spend a single ounce of willpower to fight those things. Yeah. So that's why it is really smart to create environments and conditions that take away those optionalities altogether, because you
Yeah.
want to use every bit of willpower you have to write the music and not be like, oh, don't touch your phone and don't
Yeah.
do this and don't do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it does take a certain amount of willpower if those things are available to you to there's a certain amount of energy, right, that is required to not be distracted by them. Whereas when I did this little composing trip, that's completely removed. Like so that is an interesting point. Perhaps an argument for something like what I did to get that music done.
For sure.
Yeah, but interestingly, I haven't done it again, like a little composing retreat. But now that I'm remembering it, I'm thinking maybe that's something I need to bring back.
Hopefully your wife doesn't listen to this podcast. She's like, oh, God damn it, Marcus. Why? By the way, sort of selfishly asking, and well, maybe someone listening is also a parent or a father, but do you have any like I'm a father of two now as well, 1 3-year-old and 1 1-year-old, and it is, if you want to be involved in their lives and see them daily, etc., it definitely obviously places a lot of responsibility and time and effort requirements and attention requirements from you. Do you have any like tips on how to balance the two? Because obviously creative work takes a lot of time, takes a lot of focus, and when you have kids and you actually want to be involved, that means less time and focus for your creative work. So is there anything there that like a big tip or thing that you discovered that helps you manage that balance?
I think it's one of those things where there's different seasons of where your kids are at. I've kind of, my kids now are 14, 11, and 9. And so I've been through those years where they're very young, and now they're getting to the ages where they're starting to do music themselves. And so that can be a connection, that is a connection point of all of us enjoying music and going to performances, even playing together and doing stuff like that. That's certainly something where it's part of my life. So I'm kind of, I and my wife, we both study music, so we're kind of passing that on to them and sharing that with them. So that's certainly a part of being a parent with them. But I think, another part of it is just trying to regulate how much work you might have. Obviously that's going to be different for different people out there, but you might have to say no to certain things.
Almost everything.
To leave that room open. There's certain things where, you just, I know a lot of, like, here's just a simple one, like a lot of my colleagues will go to conferences and whatnot. I very rarely go to any conferences, at least at this season of my life, because it's just like, would it be great to meet other audio professionals, other composers, other developers? Sure, of course it would be. I'd love to chat with them and whatnot. But it's just, that's time away from my family. That's a burden that's put on my wife. That's time away from my kids. And it's just at this time in my life, unless there's a talk I'm giving or something like that, it's generally not worth that. So, all that to say, there's things that I have to say no to as a professional in order to make that time for family. And I think it's important. I've seen a lot of people who are farther along in their journey as parents than I am, and they look back and they say, that they wished they had spent a little bit more time, or even some of them a lot more time, with their kids and less on their career. And that sits with me. I really think about that, because that's the time that I'm in right now. And I think, if I'm still lucky enough to be working on soundtracks 10, 15, 20 years from now, my kids will be grown, and maybe my workload would be able to balance things, right? Like maybe I'd be able to go to more of those conferences, or do more gigs or soundtrack gigs, or it's just hard to say. Like, I don't know, but it's just, I'll be honest, it's not something that I have completely 100% figured out. I don't think anyone does, but there is that tension of like, I am getting composing work done, but I'm trying to leave room for my kids too. And that does lead to some late nights of work. And if have a recording session coming up, maybe some weekends that I have to work. But that meant that earlier in the year I was able to do some other stuff with the kids. Like, there's these balance things that trade off constantly, I feel. But it's not something I have completely figured out. I just, I think that balance is just always something I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to be the best dad that I can, the most supportive dad that I can to them, help them, but also pouring my heart into the music I write when I'm doing that. So it's just both are kind of coexisting, I guess, and overlapping, more as the kids get older and they're doing more music. Like, I see those things overlapping more, where as a musician, I'm able to kind of speak into like, my daughter just had a big all-state audition. I was really helping her a lot with her practice, like being another
what is
set
that? I'm not familiar.
So all-state is it's an ensemble put together for the best musicians in a particular state, and they come together for an ensemble for a performance weekend.
Nice.
So it's pretty competitive. Like, you have to be one of the best players in the state. She's a percussionist, so
nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the right call.
So you have to be like, it's very hard. I mean, you have to really, if to get in, you've got to be really good and have practiced a lot, and it's hard. So I was helping her a lot with that, and just being another set of ears. I'm a trained musician. I'm used to listening to players and giving them feedback and hearing what they didn't do well. So I was able to kind of, like, that aspect of my professional life carried right over. I was able to help kind of guide her, help her listen for things that I was hearing that she could improve on and get better at. And so that kind of stuff is like carrying over, which is pretty cool. Like, I think that's a cool thing that can happen, especially in music, is as our kids grow up, like, as musicians, we can share that part of our life with them and be a parent to them in that way too. So yeah, I mean, but it's a journey, I'm still learning. I certainly haven't figured it all out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a process. And like you said, there are trade-offs. There are no like good or bad decisions. There are, you choose the things you sacrifice.
Yeah.
And there's always that to be made. And I think you're absolutely right, because we, prior to having kids, we talked about how we want to do this. And the thing about those younger years, and I think this is true the closer you are to the birth of the kid, like the more you are there, the closer to that beginning, the more important it is. And as they grow, as they get more independent, you can sort of get more time back. But we knew that you can't get that time back. And it's super important to build that foundation with the kid if you actually want to have like a tight relationship with them. So we just knew that's a sacrifice we want to make, because again, you can't get it back. And already if I look at pictures of our kids, well, our son, who is the older one, already like a year back, you're like, holy crap, like they're so small there, and that time was so amazing, and time goes by so fast. But it's like you realize I can't go back to that tiny kid and give them what they needed back then, and that's always going to be the case at any age that you're with them. So yeah, it's definitely tough, and it's been tough for me because like before our kids, I basically had nothing but creativity, nothing but music. So it's tough to go from like redistributing the pie, so to speak. But it's definitely a sacrifice, and it's very tough because I'm always thinking about creativity and music and all kinds of things, and it's very tough to like give some of that real estate somewhere else. But it's definitely always, when you stop to think about it, it's always worth it. Like I would regret the shit out of it if I didn't do it this way. Excuse my language, but it's like it would be so painful to me to know that I didn't make that investment. So yeah, I very much agree with what you said. Briefly, well, this kind of relates a bit to the maybe the creative block thing, but talking about Civilization 7, I mean, and we have to touch on Civ at least a bit here. I would imagine that you are there are a lot of the same civilizations in the game, but you've already, and a lot of other themes and elements of the soundtrack that you've already sort of done before. So how do you find the inspiration to do it all over again? Because I'd imagine there are new things in the new game, but there's also probably the brunt of it is something that you've already done for a previous game. So how did you approach that as a challenge, and where did you get like the inspiration to do it all over again and do it anew in a new way that works?
A lot of that just follows from the game design itself and the little kind of nuanced changes that they decide to make. So for Civ 6, for instance, like on the surface, you would say, okay, a lot of those civs are the same as in Civ 7, but they're really not, because in Civ 7, we had specific dynasties or empires that we were trying to like focus on specific time periods in traditions. Whereas for Civ 6, it could have been any time period for a particular nation or empire. Like it didn't have to be as pinpointed in terms of the inspiration behind the piece. So we would it was a more broad stroke of like a general musical tradition in Civ 6 versus Civ 7 is like very specific time periods within a tradition or specific, dynasties and what instruments would have been there at that dynasty. So that alone warranted kind of a different approach in terms of how to deal with the different arrangements and compositions. But there's still some carryover for sure. A lot of the research that I did for Civ 5 and Civ 6, I could carry into Civ 7 kind of as a foundational knowledge when I'm working with a musical tradition, and just kind of know, like, it would give me for some of the Civs, it would give me some ideas of a place to start and like things to look for and listen for. And a lot of things, like I'll have worked with someone in the past and it'll give me ideas of what to do the next time I work with them, or like interest me in doing something that's even more, like take something even farther. Like, for instance, Mongolia is a great example of this. So in Civ 5, the theme for Genghis Khan is based on a long song, but I put the long song in a solo cello, and then there's like an orchestration around it. And when I got to Civ 6, I was like, well, it would be great to include a Morin Kur, the horsehead fiddle, to feature that, to have some more instrumentation that's actually Mongolian. And so Civ 6, you hear that. And then Civ 7, I thought, oh man, we need to get like a real like long song singer, like the actual Mongolian long song singer in there. That would just be so, like, we haven't had that yet. And so it would be great to include. So then for Civ 7, we've got a long song singer, we've got a throat singer, whole ensemble of Morin Kurs. It just like took it to another level. But those experiences before kind of made me realize, like, first of all, the kind of music and musical traditions coming out of Mongolia, but also the things that I thought could still be brought out in the new soundtrack, in the new piece, that could highlight it even more. So those kind of ideas are kind of in my mind when I'm approaching a Civ that I've already worked on. Well, how could I make this even better? Or what are the things that I brought before, but I could make even better, or elements that I wasn't able to include before that I could bring in this time? Those kind of things are always in my mind. And that's kind of, I guess, what keeps it fresh as you work on the next iteration, that you're not really just repeating what you did before, but you're kind of course, balancing it against what the gameplay changes are, and what game design wanted. And in terms of this, because of the age system, we definitely knew we needed more time period specific music, which warranted a lot more musicians actually, who had to come from specific backgrounds to get those time periods represented.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, that it's always based on the game mechanics and systems and design. So that's a really good point to bring up. Briefly touching very selfishly on mixing, and you are a rare composer in this regard, that you, to my understanding, you do your own mixing, correct?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Do you have, so this is something that I think is the one of the biggest things that I need to work on and figure out, because my music just doesn't sound the way that I want it to. And I'm still, I have a lot of skills in mixing, but there's something about the perspective on the big balance of it that I'm sort of struggling with. But long story short, was there like a big mixing aha moment for you, or breakthrough, that made you understand what to aim for and how to bring the mix into a place that sort of sounds balanced and professional? Is there like a single big aha moment or something like that you had, or was it sort of a more gradual process perhaps?
It's a gradual process. We did a lot of critical listening as part of my recording degree, where we would just listen to recordings and just hear what's going on, see if we could hear certain ways that things were mic'd, certain when we were doing compression, we would listen for certain artifacts that would come from things being compressed in a certain way, and just learning how to listen very critically to audio was something that was a big part of that degree that I carried into my professional life, where now when I started putting together my own mixes, I do a lot of A/B work. Like, how does that compare to this orchestra mix or this orchestra mix, and trying to hear what those differences are. in terms of perspective, or what about the dry versus reverb signal, or what about the panning of the instruments across the stereo field, and just listening very critically to how a mix is sitting, and comparing to various other soundtrack recordings or classical recordings, or all of that is a big part of it. And just when you listen to those other recordings, it critically, you can learn a lot. It'll just challenge you, and you just see if you can, the things that you like in that recording, see if you can kind of bring those into your own mix, right? In terms of how things are sitting and what works well. So I think that's a big part of it. It's just a lot of listening critically to recordings, and then going back to yours and seeing, okay, well, what's not sitting right there, and learning in that way. I think it's a big part of it.
So A/B referencing and depression is the answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Moving into the last batch of questions. Hopefully we can go through these. But what's next in store for you, to the extent that you're allowed to talk about what you're working on, and perhaps relating to that, what is a project you'd like to do but haven't yet done?
So I think it was announced there's a batch of DLC coming up for Civ 7. That's coming up. So that's on my plate as part of it. There's some stuff that I can't talk about for game development, but there's some other stuff that I've been working on that is not related to games, that I'm hoping to release sometime in the next year or two, which is, I've had all this music that I wrote 15, 20 years ago that I kind of forgot about when I went into games. And I've been kind of revisiting all of it. Like, these are just concert pieces and stuff like that. And some of it I've listened to, just here I am distanced from it 20 years. And I'm like, that's not a bad piece of music. I should do something with that. And so I've been slowly trying to like revisit some of that stuff and record it. Actually, that cello trio that I mentioned,
it's coming back.
I turned it into a string orchestra piece. So I'm hoping to I actually did record it, so I'm hoping to edit that and release that at some point. There's some other stuff. Actually, there's a version of I Vow to Thee, My Country that was in Civ 5 that I have been meaning to release a new recording of. I have a license from the publisher to be able to make a new recording, and I actually have the new recording of it. I recorded it, but I haven't had the time to edit it or mix it yet. That is something that's I really need to just get done, and I'm hoping to have that done hopefully in the next month. We'll see if that happens. I will try my very hardest. But basically, I'm trying to I have this idea of kind of putting together a bunch of string orchestra things to go along with that string orchestra arrangement that I did of the cello trio piece. I'd like to kind of put together a bunch of things just as an independent album, just to kind of remind myself this is just music that I just wrote for the sake of writing my own music, not for a specific game, not for a specific musical tradition, not for just my own voice. And just revisiting that is in a way really nice and really invigorating and life-giving, especially when I go back to the soundtrack work. It just gives you that fresh perspective. So that's something I'm hoping to do a little bit more of over the next year or two, is just some of my own independent music and get that released and recorded, hopefully. So, and beyond that, it's just, being a dad. That's
More
a
of
lot of
that to
time.
come.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, I can't wait to hear what you release. Moving into the very few last questions. What is your definition of an artist? And this doesn't have to be like an all exhaustive definition. You could explore a certain aspect if you want, but you can take it anywhere into any direction that comes to mind.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think, to be an artist is the ability to use a certain medium to express something that communicates to others. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. So if for me as a musician, it's the ability to express something through that music that's communicating to others something. But that can carry over to any medium. It could be a painting, it could be literature, it can be dance, performance, any of that, of course, can be art, and it's the same idea that you're using a particular medium to communicate something, and others can perceive what's being communicated, or they're receiving something from you. It's not nothing. Something is being communicated through that medium. I think that's what I would boil it down to, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a medium of communication beyond words.
Yeah.
Perhaps even, I think it's even more extensive than words, but that's a different topic for a different time.
Yeah.
If you could send a message to everyone's smartphone in the world, so you're going to send a message and it's going to appear on the lock screen on their phone, so they have to look at it in order to unlock their phone, what would you send? Other than go listen to Geoff Knorr and his music.
Oh man.
No pressure, not a big decision to make.
I don't know if I would word it something like this, but the first thing that comes to my mind is something along the lines of just realizing that the life you have and the breath you're breathing is a gift that you have to make the most of, and that's true for everyone around you too. So the idea that you should be thankful for what you have, but the person next to you is also experiencing that gift as well. So the idea that, you don't want to be like this terrible human being because what you have is a gift, but what the person next to you has is also a gift. So you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of mentality, just of gratefulness for what you have, and a new day. So I don't know, something along those lines.
Yeah. It's very true, and you only, unfortunately, often realize it when it's too late, when the option is taken away from you. So
yeah.
Very valid. Is there somebody you would like to see on this podcast? A guest you would like to hear?
Oh, I don't know.
It doesn't have to be realistic. I'm just keeping a list of people to pursue.
That's interesting.
They have to be alive, though. Well, with AI, technically, I guess I
Yeah,
can
I was going to
assume
say there would be some pretty fascinating people.
there's going to be
That's
Bach
something I've always
on.
thought about. Like, man, how crazy would it be to go back in time and
Yep.
just see what this person was like? I think,
Who
Yeah.
would you talk
Anyway.
to?
Goodness, I don't know. Like, no one's coming to mind specifically for this one. So
Yeah, it could also be like doesn't have to be a specific person, but well, I guess we can skip the question if nothing. I was thinking that it could be someone from a certain specific like profession, like dancing or like a creative field, I guess, or a writer, or
yeah.
it doesn't have to be a musician though.
Yeah, there's actually a guy that I collaborate a lot with on my recording sessions. He's the conductor, Andy Brick. He has a really interesting background. I mean, we're kind of similar because we're both composers, but he does a lot more conducting work. And then he's done a lot of, he's done work in animation. He does a lot of game music concerts that tour around the world.
Nice.
So he'd be kind of an interesting, like parallel, I guess, to have on this podcast, just because he would bring a similar perspective, but definitely from a different angle than I have. So that's someone you could consider having on the show.
Cool.
In a similar musical field, at least.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there's anyone else. Yeah.
Maybe you can help me make the connection.
Yeah, he'd probably find it kind of interesting too. Just this long format of being able to talk about so many different topics.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd probably find it interesting actually. So
cool. Well, let's. I'll try and make it happen. Maybe you can put in a good word for me as well.
Yeah.
Sort of relating to this, is there like a creativity related question that's been on your mind lately, and you've been sort of thinking about an answer for that? Is there like a specific problem or a challenge that's been on your mind that you would like to have be answered? Or that you're working an answer for?
I think this ongoing kind of challenge that we have in games, and especially games like Civ, that a player can play for just hours and hours and hours and hours, like hundreds of hours, is how to keep things musically interesting and to not get on the players, to not be annoying to the player musically. And I think that's something that struggle, I think, especially in games, will always be there, is how can we musically, for such a long duration of time, how can we make this musically compelling, musically interesting? That's something we're still thinking about a lot on certainly the Civ games, but any game that I work on. It was like that certainly for Ara History Untold, which I also worked on, a lot. Huge interactive music system in that game. But I think there's not a single answer to that question. Like that's one of the interesting things about working in games is every game can kind of come up with its new solution to that challenge and different ways of dealing with it. So that's something that I'm kind of always thinking about a little bit, is especially on game soundtracks, is just how to deal with that challenge in the best way. there's all sorts of ways of handling it, and that have been done. And just
Yeah.
it's always something on my mind when I'm working on the next soundtrack is will this communicate with the player? Will this help the player? And will it make the game a good experience for the player over a very long duration time period?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think great music can really get you. I mean, that's a very broad, like, generalization description, but I think that can get you very far. But it's certainly true if you play for hundreds of hours, then it's maybe it can get a bit too much. But maybe I'm sure you explored this already, but I'm sure there's like some. Depends on what you're doing. I mean, for electronic music, the generative stuff would be quite easy to do. But maybe for what, like a Civ, you could have a bank of different performances or sounds, and then it kind of randomly maybe pieces them together from different banks in a way that's obviously still worked. You would obviously have to go through all the pairings, but maybe something like that.
Yeah, and it that kind of stuff, but also mixed with another thing I think about is, like, if you think about a great orchestral work, like a big symphony or a big tone poem, there's a natural kind of ebb and flow that happens there that also has to be considered when you're working on like a really long duration soundtrack where like, are we leaving enough space? Are things basically, is there enough musical breathing room between the musical big moments that the big moments feel meaningful and not like overused? You think of like the game being like a big, long symphony in that sense, like as it's accompanying the gameplay, making sure that there's enough ebb and flow to the musicality of it is, I think, like on an overarching, like not just the little phrases, because the little phrases are important to get variation, but also on the big overarching statement as well. And then depending on how the player plays, does that overarching statement have a way of changing from gameplay to gameplay? Those kind of things, like those ideas are always a little bit in my mind. How do we do that? Don't have the answers yet.
Yeah, no, that it's a super interesting topic, and it sounds very interesting the way you describe it there. And yeah, I think probably we'll see more of the. I still think interactivity, like interactive music in games, is still in its infancy. Like, it seems very rudimentary in many ways. Often, obviously, that's a generalization and not referencing any specific stuff. But I think there's so much we can still do in music, and maybe even have, like you said, players making choices. And would be pretty cool for someone to go into a game and play, and they're going to describe the music like quite differently from somebody else who has a very different play style, and be like, yeah, like that wasn't at all what I experienced, and both still be good experiences. But that would be pretty cool, like to have the soundtrack be so vast and interactive. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Is there any social media or website you want to mention? Where do you want people to go to check out your stuff?
Yeah, certainly you can find out more about my stuff on my website. And actually, I'm one of the few composers, due to a licensing agreement with the publisher, especially for the Civ games, I'm able to make a lot of those scores available to the public, which is pretty unique among soundtracks. So I do have a website store there for sheet music for anyone who's interested in like diving deeper into some of the orchestral stuff that I've written for games and stuff. So,
Nice.
and you know, other than that, pretty much all the soundtracks I've worked on, except for the Aura one, are on the streaming services. So you can listen to those there. And then my website has lots of stuff on there about games I've worked on, and also some of my. I don't do too much concert music these days, but there's some of that on there. There's the sheet music store. So yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to link everything in the description, so
Cool.
people can also find it there. But thank you so much for taking the time again. This has been very fun and informative for me, and I know again you're busy, so I appreciate the time, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you a bit as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. You made it a joy to sit down and just talk about this stuff for, goodness, I can't believe it's already been 3 hours. So I mean, yeah, just you know, it feels like we're just sitting down and enjoying a beer together or something and chatting over stuff. So it's been enjoyable.
That's good to hear, because that's kind of the format I aim for. You know, natural discussions. That's literally the metaphor or comparison I use when people ask, like, what is it like? I just want it to be like two people talking about stuff while having a beer, something similar to that. So
yeah, it felt like that. Good. So it was great.
Good.
So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to it, and I'll take myself and see what kind of a Armageddon is going on back home. So if the kids are sleeping.
I hope they are.
Yeah, let's hope so. Cool. Awesome. Take care.
Great. Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, I'll talk with you soon.
All right. Sounds good.